Well, for more on what's coming out of the Danish elections, we can bring in Ulrik Pram Gad, senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies. Thank you so much for talking to us here on France 24 today. Now, Frederiksen has led Denmark since 2019. She is, if narrowly, projected to secure another term. Her grand coalition, though, is expected not to win a parliamentary majority. What impact is that likely to have on her plans?
I think we will get closer to something like, the Dutch and Belgian situation, where it takes some time to form a government and we'll have to patch it together with a lot of parties. So at the moment, we're waiting for the results from the elections, but the real result will only appear in maybe days, maybe weeks before a number of parties will have to agree on how to proceed.
Now, Frederiksen called this vote months before the October deadline. What was the thinking there for people not so familiar, possibly, with the Danish election process? And do you think it's likely to pay off?
The Social Democrats, like Social Democrats and other broad traditional people's parties in Europe, have been eroding in terms of electoral support for decades. But actually, the erosion of the support for the Danish Social Democrats has been slower than other places. And therefore, I think the Trump debacle and the Greenland crisis gave her, as your correspondent mentioned, a bump in the approval ratings. And she thought, maybe I can use that momentum going into the elections to stop the erosion of the support. That didn't happen, but the fragmentation of the political landscape around her still makes her the most likely person to lead the government going forward.
Now, a correspondent just then suggested that the Trump question regarding Greenland wasn't such a decisive factor at the end of the day. Would you agree with that assessment?
On the one hand, it is she very much tried to play on that. The trouble is that she's been forming this broad center government with a Minister of Foreign Affairs and a Minister for Defense, who also played important roles in the battle with Trump in relation to the rearmament of Denmark, in relation to European integration, in relation to Ukraine. So we have the three leading characters of the three parties that, in the Danish public's eyes, have been steering through this troubled water. They were all vying for the position as Prime Minister. At the same time, the domestic politics that these three parties have been conducting have not been very popular. So there's been this erosion of the center parties and more support for the left wing and for the right wing.
I'd like to talk a little bit about a major election issue that we've been hearing about time and time again, the cost of living crisis. Frederiksen, of course, presiding over rising prices, a lot of discontent among Danish people. Just how much has that particular issue affected the outcome for the Prime Minister today?
I think it made a difference, particularly for some of the very right-wing parties that actually have been campaigning on that issue from way back from the Corona inflation. It kind of waned in the public attention, but then came Trump's war on Iran. So the hiking gas prices the last couple of weeks actually, in that sense, helped some of the most critical parties towards the center government. So it made a difference in the end, I'm sure.
Now, I'm reading here that if the results announced by the exit polls are confirmed, the centrist moderate party is likely to become the kingmaker with 14 seats. How do you think the moderate party might sway the final aspect of the coalition government that comes out of this election?
Actually, we have two different major TV channels in Denmark, and they have a different exit polls So they don't agree exactly on the role of the moderates. And on top of that, there is a number of the centrist parties that might conceivably be moved around. Plus, we're still waiting for any kind of indications of what members of parliaments would come from Greenland and from the Faroe Islands. They each sent two members to parliament. So there's a lot of members of parliament in the middle that can combine in different ways. So it's really, really interesting to see whether it will be possible to patch together a left-wing government, or it will be easier to patch together some kind of center government. But there's really nobody who can know that at this point in time.
Ulrik Pram Gad, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Ulrik Pram Gad, Senior Researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies. Thank you very much.